So good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders would like to welcome the phenomenally talented entrepreneur, restaurateur, um, ASID designer, philanthropist, founder and developer, published author, product producer, podcast host, and president of the Imaging Design Incorporated, Barbara Lazaroff. So welcome, Barbara.
Karen, it's an absolute pleasure. I sound like 10 people, but it's just me. Okay.
So Barbara, firstly, I would like to congratulate you on all your achievements. Can you please share with us how your entrepreneurial journey started?
Well, I grew up as a working class little girl in the South Bronx, and from there the trajectory was to Queens, to Long Island, to Manhattan to go to school. But I think a lot of it had to do with both my parents were working parents, and not doctors, not scientists, not people in white collar jobs. It was really truly working class. And sometimes if my father lost a job, my mother thankfully was there with one. It was not an easy childhood in the sense that sometimes there simply wasn't enough money for everything. And I saw the stress that money could create. So I think at a very early age, I knew, because my mother often spoke about the importance of education, that education can absolutely change your life. If you're well prepared, well spoken, well educated, well versed in many areas, you can achieve and you can bring your position up in life. And that position didn't include for me the mere idea of marrying somebody with money. I still remember many years later, bless him, because they're both gone, but my father once said to my mother when I was entertaining the idea of becoming a physician, and I had studied, biochemistry, genetics, whatever. I don't understand why Barbara wants to be a doctor. She could just marry one. And when I heard that, I was just so shocked, because it's how hard my two brothers and I had worked in school. So the answer to the question comes from that long explanation I've just given you, that when you see a certain aspect of life being very difficult, meaning not having money to pay bills, not sometimes having enough money to put enough food on the table or to clothe the children properly or to pay your bills, something inside of some children or some individuals makes them want to excel. And I knew that I had to create that in many ways for myself. Sometimes for many people, it can do the opposite. It can suppress those desires unless you have a mentor or people that can bring you along and make you believe that you have worth and that you can achieve things in life, and that show you that there's a bigger window of opportunity out there, which is what I do in terms of my charitable or philanthropic work or my mentorship with young people. I think that if you haven't seen that there's something else out there, you often don't know that there's something else out there, and all you see are the television shows or the violence or people acquiring status in ways that aren't really the way we should inspire our youth to acquire things.
Yes, absolutely. So you are renowned for your innovative restaurant concepts, and as the brand and co-founder and interior designer of acclaimed restaurants, Spargo Hollywood. Can you please share with us how this came about and what was unique and special about the style and the concept, especially in such a competitive industry?
Yes, it is. The restaurant or hospitality industry, as you've said, Karen, is a very competitive one. I wholly agree with that.
Mm.
I think that when my former husband, still business partner, Chef Wolfgang Puck and I met, he was very young, I was younger, and he had aspirations. I thought I was going to go on to be a physician, but prior to that, I was at NYU in New York, other universities after that in other areas like Berkeley and chemistry, but there I was studying theater, and it wasn't just acting, it wasn't just dance, it wasn't simply that. The program included set design, lighting, many aspects of the theater, even critique. But along with that, I was taking science classes and whatever. And what happened with that was when Wolfgang Puck, when Wolfgang started, we met in a very sort of unusual way in a club.
Yes.
I had a girlfriend that kept asking me, why are you always reading? She was French. Why are you always reading that big book? And I said to her, it's an organic chem textbook. And if you want to be a physician, a doctor, you have to excel at all these things. And she says, oh, do you like to dance? Do you like to do this? So it took about 4 months, and I finally went with her, and I met her there, and we're speaking. And then the story goes, it's been documented many times, where I wanted to get rid of the I can't quite say gentleman, the guy sitting next to me who kept annoying me, and I leaned over, and Wolf was the first person there, and I said, do you want to dance? I just wanted to get away. The next thing I know, I went to visit his cooking class the next day. The next thing that happened, I was editing and writing, actually composing the prose for his first cookbook. I'm also responsible for getting his name on the book, far larger than what was presently there. They had the name of the restaurant at the time, Ma Maison, far larger, and his name very small. And I said to him, no, that's not the way it should be. He had been telling me over a period of months how he had dreamed about having a restaurant and whatever. And I said, and he had dreamed about having possibly a restaurant he had seen in Italy, in the south of France, where he had worked, where they had these little pizza ovens out front. And I said, well, we could do something like that. We could make it a little more interesting or whatever. And he said, I don't know. And he hadn't done anything about it. And then one day, we were watching TV in the middle of the day. The TV happened to be on, and he happened to see one of the waiters from the restaurant on TV cooking and doing something, talking about the waiters' race for charity, and it irked him. I could see he was very upset about it. He goes, why is he on TV? Why is my waiter on TV? He doesn't even cook. So I turned to him, I said, do you, I don't know, do you want to be on TV? And that led to one thing after another, where I had a friend who was in the industry. I called her. She had me call another friend who was a casting director, all in a matter of, an hour. And I booked him on a TV show, and I really wasn't a manager or agent, but I knew enough somehow, I don't know how, that I said I wanted to be a national show. So it went into 117 markets, and the next thing that happened with the book was he had to go touring with the book after it was finished. And one thing led to the other, and I had called the fire department the day he said, another day when he said, I said, let me try. And for some reason at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which is what it was between the lunch and dinner service at Ma Maison, which was a big celebrity haunt at the time, but really, frankly, a dreadful looking little restaurant with astroturf on the floor and plastic ducks as lights. And it's really, it's a complete joke that this was the go-to place for all the celebrities. And it was going to close, but Wolf had elevated the cuisine. He had come from Maxime's, and he had come from a place in Minneapolis where you wouldn't think it, but they had a really good restaurant there they had gone to. Anyway, the story of his life is well documented. What happened then was I got the fire marshal on the phone, and naivete won out, because I said, we're thinking about putting a wood-burning oven in a restaurant to make pizzas in. And he said to me, seriously, like this, he goes, well, lady, he did really, he said, lady, would the customers, would the patrons be able to get near it? And I could tell the inflection in his tone, like, oh no, that wouldn't work. I said, no, we're going to put a big counter in front of it. It just came out of my head. And of course we would have needed one anyway. And he said, oh, sounds okay, lady. And I turned to Wolf and I said, yeah, let's do it. And so these tales, which are true, but they're tales of success, young, naive success, have been well documented in many magazines and books and whatever. But they're quite funny. And I'm waiting to tell the little strange details here and there in between the conjuries of this when I write my own book one day, but I'm waiting for more people to die.
Okay. Amazing. So that leads me to obviously the present and current situation of COVID-19 and how it's turned our world upside down and changed our lives forever. So how, as an entrepreneur, have you had to adapt, and can you give us any examples?
We've had to adapt and then readapt and then adapt and then readapt again. Yes. Obviously, I want to say to everybody out there first who has suffered or have had friends or family members who have suffered through COVID or have lost family members, how deeply sad that is, because I too have lost a number of friends, and I have now at this point, it was 8 girlfriends. Just before this call, you and I, or you and the two of us, I heard that a friend got out of the hospital, so I'm happy to hear that. Should have said you and me, I guess. So it's rather devastating. With regard to business, we have restaurants which are, of course, essential for the world. So when COVID first hit, and it got worse and worse, and it's at a particularly bad place in California right now. We are on the second wave, and it's far worse than the first wave. The numbers are astronomical. We had a situation where we were forced to close all of our restaurants, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and around the world, Singapore, in Istanbul, many places. It was devastating financially for many people. Yeah. We were lucky to have, blessed enough to have, and smart enough to have some monies in the coffers, so to speak. So we paid our staff till the end of June, actually. And but we still had to furlough hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. And in fact, the restaurant industry, and not really, the whole hospitality industry, that's about 15.5 million people in America that were out of work. It's 4% of the gross, of the GDP. Of America. It's just devastating. So what we've done now is, as the restaurants were able to open in-house dining again, we reopened, but of course with social distancing and all the precautions. We used to take many, of course, before, because you have to keep restaurants very clean. You don't want a situation where people are going to get ill from your food. Everything is very precise in terms of bringing food in, storing it, keeping it at the correct temperature, cooking it properly, not putting, let's say, a raw chicken on a surface and then putting something else there, salmonella, other. So we have to be very careful, and our chefs are trained, we're high-end restaurants. So they're trained to understand these things anyway. But in this situation, everything went into high gear in terms of constant cleaning of surfaces, constant maintaining of personal hygiene for the chefs. Everybody wears masks, everybody wears visors, everybody wears gloves, including me. I go into my restaurants all dressed up, jewelry, clothing, heels, and then I put on a mask and a visor.
Yeah.
And that people can't understand the thing I'm saying. But other than that, we had to reclose the restaurants when Governor Newsom, our California governor, said numbers are rising. And I have to give myself a little pat on the head for this. I sadly saw this coming. So
Yes.
I started to prepare with what's called Open BH, Open Beverly Hills. I had started meeting via Zoom and then in person with masks. The head of city engineering, the head of traffic. I spoke to the head of special events. And I was one of the very first people to pull permits for outdoor dining. So presently, besides our patio area that's inside the restaurant, it's open to the sky, we have close to 60 seats outside that run down the sidewalk and then go around the corner in front of the big wall, the big art mural there that makes Cannon, where Spago is, cul-de-sac. And that happened because of some other events that happened prior to that, Kieran. We are also having a subway come through the middle of Beverly Hills. So I've been working on that for over 5 years. I'm on task committee for stakeholders for the Metro, and people have said to me, why didn't you stop it, Barbara? You have so much clout. You could have spoken up. You could have gone to city council. I said, I go to city council and I speak, but you can't stop a federal initiative. This is a federal, project. So I said, what you can do in life, and this is a lesson not just for the Metro, and I'll tell you about how it pertains to COVID. You have to take a situation that seems to be something you don't want, you're not welcoming necessarily, and you have to say, how can I make this better? How can I improve on this? And how can we protect ourselves and the community? So the stakeholders got together. There's stakeholder committees for this. And one of the things I did was I started speaking out that I wanted a big wall built. It was very controversial, but we have an open patio that's very close to Wilshire. And I said, look, we're going to have particulates in the air. We're going to have noise and dust and dirt. And I can't have a situation where, 40% to 50% of my business is eliminated because of the Metro going in. And they put the staging area right next to us on the corner. So we had particularly more issues. So I now have an 80-foot long by 20-foot wall. And then the next thing that happened was we got together, business owners or whatever that were in Cannon and other people in the community and the city council. And we found there was a company that was hired to find various artists. And now we have a Matsuyama. I always have a problem with his last name. The piece is a beautiful abstract that actually LACMA has put one in the permanent collection. So we have that there. So you have a cul-de-sac created by this beautiful piece of art. And then we've added plants and things. So that is how we took a 90-degree with COVID. Then again, in closing on this conversation, there are lots of smaller restaurants, lots of smaller businesses that have lost their businesses. I don't know if they will be able to come back because they didn't have money in the coffers. They don't have a situation where they can pivot like that. They don't have the ability, some of them, I had even spoken, I sit on a COVID, Beverly Hills City Council COVID-19 business recovery task force. And I spoke to the issue of we need to get the other restaurants to do parklets in the street, build areas, platforms in the street, and they didn't do it soon enough. So now they're promoting it, and hopefully other restaurants will do more of this. Some of the restaurants have gone into parking lots, some have done this, but not enough, akin to the way dining is in Europe. And now people are even saying that the temporary wall should stay up, but that's going to be another huge project for me. I don't know if I can convince people. So it's a long answer to your question. I think that there's far more complexity here. You asked about my own business, but of course, in life and in business, it's all a synergy of everybody having to work together. We, in the hospitality industry, affect so many other businesses, from people who supply tablecloths, flowers, event planning. There are no big events or gatherings. So many of people have gone out of business, and I don't know if they'll recuperate. And the end to this is, you have to convince your guests that they can feel confident and safe to come to dinner outdoors. Yes. And that's a challenge. And also, Karen, many businesses cannot survive on a 40 to 50% cut in the capacity, which is forced. We have the space to do tables 6 feet apart, even when we were doing the in-house dining. Yes. Many people cannot. So therefore, we're going to see a massive change in New York, in other places, and in LA, Chicago, in terms of who makes it through this and who doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite sad, because I mean, some of those people have been in business for decades, so it's going to have a massive impact.
Yeah, it's their family businesses for generations. And I must say, the other sad thing is, it's affecting philanthropy as well. All of us in the restaurant industry that would give away a dinner for 2, a dinner for 4. Right before we closed, I did a dinner for 8 that brought in, that was auctioned off. It brought in $60,000 to Project Angel Food that feeds homebound individuals who started off with HIV and AIDS, moved on to other individuals in need, any kind of condition that causes them to be homebound. The project I work on for No Kid Hungry, that feeds children in school-age children so that they can have meals and come to school and have the capacity to be educated. Because how do you think about learning when your stomach is growling and your mind is not developing properly? Yeah. And when you miss the opportunity to grow a healthy child, brain cells, body cells, everything, you at some point you've actually damaged that child for life. Yeah. And so all of these things are being sadly so hit up and so negatively affected, and there's so much funding that isn't coming in from the private sector anymore.
Yes, for sure. It's hectic. So what would you say, well, this leads into the next question. So what would you say some of the biggest lessons and learnings have been within your career?
I'm sorry, because the computer was kind of, you're saying some of the lessons in my career?
Yeah, so some of the biggest lessons and learnings in your career.
I also think it's that English accent that makes everything sound wonderful. The lessons. Okay, the lessons. I think that it's an important lesson in life to know that along with success, even great success, can come great failures.
Yeah.
And you have to be tempered. And I don't mean hardened, but you have to know that it can be heartbreaking to fail. It affects many other people in our situation, because when we've had to close a restaurant, it may very well be 100 people's jobs. And I've stood in the middle of a restaurant talking to the staff with tears rolling from my eyes, and hugging people, which we can't do in the time of COVID anymore, but I miss it because I'm a hugger. Yeah. Some of those decisions were really hard to come to, because accountants and people, bean counters tell you, no, you really have to do this. It's just not going to work because this happened or that happened. And I said, I can't do it. And we still then paid people, 2 weeks salary, even when we hadn't paid certain taxes that needed to be paid. And then my former husband and I, we were left with $1 million bill because we couldn't declare personal bankruptcy, but the 2 partners, and I don't like to point fingers, but in this case, one in particular had really botched something up so badly. And they just declared personal bankruptcy, and we couldn't do that because we had other businesses and other things and other people's welfare to think about, and the children, many things. So we just bit down hard and we suffered. We actually, the home I live in now, which I subsequently remodeled, and it's much nicer. We almost lost that house because we were to the edge having to pay off bills like that. So again, it's important, and it starts in childhood, I think. I think that when you raise your children and you keep covering for them so that they never fail, or they always feel they have to be a winner, or they have to win that race, or they have to, sometimes when they make mistakes, it's good. And I'm guilty of this too sometimes, where I have been guilty of this, where you want to cushion it for your children.
Yeah.
And it doesn't teach them the right lessons. My mom was a great mother. She was a great mentor. She was a fantastic teacher. She understood these important lessons because she had a very tough upbringing where her mother died when she was 4, and she had truly the Cinderella story. Now my gardener is gardening outside. Do you hear that?
Sort of, not too much.
Okay, that's good. So I think that the biggest lesson is learning to deal with failure and coming back from it. The old adage of the bootstraps, and being able to really be positive enough to move forward. I think the other lessons are to always be kind.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, kindness, and I will say compassion. People use the word empathy, but that's not really correct, because I think in order to empathize with somebody, you have to have really you've had to experience what they've experienced. I've had friends that have lost children, and I'm really blessed not to be a part of that club. You can't know it. It's sort of like when I used to console my friends who have lost their parents or their mom, and I realize now, until you lose your own, you don't really have that same sense of understanding, the depth of understanding. So I think kindness, compassion, listening. Oh my God. I don't think there's anything. I'm doing a lot of talking here, but let me tell you, a lot of times I have to just listen. Listening is a very important character trait and a very important tool in life, in relationships, in raising children, in friendship, and in business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you've had an incredibly impressive career. So Spargo Hollywood was the flagship for other unique leading restaurants under the Spargo brand, and being the co-founder of Wolfgang Puck Fine Dining Catering Worldwide, was the journey of expanding and partnering with the world's finest culinary talents an organic process for you? Is this did this come naturally, or was it?
No, I mean, the aspect of the culinary end of it was really left up to Wolf and his skill sets and talents.
Okay.
I mean, this was his end of it, and my portion was trying to deal with the business aspects. And I used to, many years ago, no longer, I used to read the contracts. As Wolf used to say, Oh, he used to despise when I did his accent, but everybody used to say, you know, if Babawa signs it, then I know I can sign it. If I didn't understand something, and that's another good lesson, you know, read everything. Try to make yourself aware of all the aspects of your business, but surround yourself with experts, mavens who really understand it, a good accountant, an honest accountant, and
Yes,
and
absolutely.
sometimes have it audited and have it double checked. A really good attorney. And in the beginning, you may not be able to afford that, but then you've got to find somebody that can maybe help you with that, maybe do an exchange of some sort. But you shouldn't be signing contracts if you don't understand the verbiage, if you don't understand the so-called fine print.
Yeah,
If
and
you
especially the language that's used.
absolutely, it's really important. I even had a very so-called sophisticated CEO that I'm going to use a technical term now. He screwed up one of our restaurants in Seattle because he didn't understand the estoppel agreement, and he didn't understand the CAM charges and how much they were going to rise. He didn't grasp that end of it, and I didn't have at that point, because that was our was it already worldwide? Had become worldwide food company? Yes. No. It was still the food company moving on to becoming worldwide. And the problem was that even though the restaurant kept increasing in terms of gross revenue, the monies, the overhead kept increasing as well. And basically the restaurant didn't make sense anymore. And that was heartbreaking for me to lose it, because it was 3 levels of this exquisite restaurant called Aubergine that I put my heart and soul into. And one of our other concepts I had come up with, well, culinarily wise, you know, no, Wolf was doing that, the chefs. But when we knew we wanted to do a fusion type of Asian cuisine, I collected art. I traveled all over, collected art, and came up with a very unusual design. And I was often away from the kids. I would fly back and forth, which also broke my heart, to be away from my young children, because I had my children very late in life, 35 and 41, building restaurants, being in restaurants until 3, 4 in the morning, and then getting up really early, you know, averaging 2 to 4 hours of sleep a night. It was exhausting. So we lost that one. So I think it's important for people to understand what they're signing, what they're doing, and even then, more mistakes were made later on by attorneys themselves who didn't really grasp the total language of California law that was changing. And this happens often. It does, not often, but it happens enough that it can just infuriate you.
Yeah,
Really.
absolutely. So that leads me to leadership, or the lack of leadership, which is obviously a very big point of conversation at the moment.
Oh my goodness.
So what do you believe sets your leadership style apart from others in your industry? And what do you believe has given you the edge and helped you to sustain longevity in a highly competitive industry? And then the second part of that would be, what do you believe as entrepreneurs what do we need to do to improve the current narrative from an entrepreneurial perspective and on a global scale when it comes to leadership?
Well, I think you may have to ask me the second part again, but
okay.
I think I think you're, in terms of poor leadership, I think you're referring to our president at the moment, and I will not get into that, of course, because I would probably get far too irate.
Yes.
He's not on my hit parade by any means. I think that he lacks the character and the emotional maturity, and he lacks the compassion of a truly good leader. So I think a leader, a good leader, yes, all of these things that make you different, like being a visionary, those things are defined in different ways. Sometimes being the very first in a field is not often the best, because sometimes the very first in a field makes mistakes. I mean,
Yes.
you know, if you think about Edison, he really wasn't the first, but he was the one who garnered all of the, you know, it was Tesla maybe. So poor Tesla went down in flames, and then you have Edison. So sometimes, but there was a lot of corrupt stuff going on with poor Tesla there. He got shafted, so to speak.
Yes.
But so I think leadership has to do with, I think we need more transparency.
Absolutely.
We need more integrity, authenticity. You need, as I've spoken about, more kindness and compassion. And I think what sets women apart these days is, I used to have a phrase by a famous Black educator, female educator, that said, women make great leaders, often managers and leaders, because they're often dealing with 3 children and only 2 cookies. So it's about negotiation skills. It's about inclusivity, you know, being inclusive.
Yes.
It's about, of course, and I've always been inclusive, and now we have issues of diversity. We should have always had issues in been a more diverse society. And now I'm going to speak to America, but this goes globally. We have what we call the browning of America, meaning that our population isn't this white male stale, as my attorney likes to talk about it. He says, I'm an older white man, and we're on the way out. What the young people coming up, it is a melange of people of all cultures, racial backgrounds, religions, no religion, different belief systems, spiritual, not spiritual, whatever it might be. You have to be respectful as a leader of people's differing opinions, presented, of course, in a proper manner. I think that protesting is fine. I think that rioting, causing not just physical damage to people's properties and everything, but to people's selves, hurting people, shooting people, beating people. This is inexcusable. No. Then again, I do agree that we need police mentality to change as well. It's got to be a negotiation and compromise across the board. Yes. But getting back to the issue about leadership, what I mean by being visionary, it's not just having the next great app or the next great idea. It's about being visionary about how people will work and play in the work environment, how they will interact with each other, how they will communicate. How willing are you to let people communicate their ideas? Because goodness, when you do, the most beautiful things come out of that. And from those ideas, sparks create, warming flames, not the kind that burn buildings down, the kind that stimulate other ideas. So there's that. And then there was a second part to your question about leadership. And
so the second part was what do you believe as entrepreneurs that we need to improve the current narrative from an entrepreneurial perspective and a global scale when it comes to leadership?
Well, I think, as I said, some of the virtues or character traits that I find that I'm impressed with people, and the fact that I'm a woman, I think has always helped. I started Women Chefs and Restaurateurs. I'm part of the National Association of Women Business Owners. I was one of the first people of the Network of Executive Women in Hospitality in LA chapter. I've been involved in lots of women's groups from the time I was extremely young, even being a brownie and a Girl Scout, because you learn You learn skills and leadership qualities and how to get along with others and how to share. And that's another good thing about leadership, sharing the wealth, sharing the ideas, sharing the platform. So I think that entrepreneurs today, leaders today, we have the ability to speak out. We have the ability to influence. We have the ability to mentor. And bringing other young women and men up that ladder of success from whatever walk of life they may come. And I try to do it with, obviously, young women. I'm just going to be forthright. I involved with a lot of young women's groups and young girls, abused girls. The Viva home I redid, I raised $1 million, and with my design skills and my connections was able to provide a nicer home for these young women years ago, because I think that the environment that a person is in, particularly when they're in a home like that, when they have beauty or things of value around them, they feel valued. They look around at their desk and their closet and the newer carpeting on the floor, and they learn to take care of it. And they learn to realize they have to take care of themselves and to value themselves. And we did art classes and other things. So going back to the point, by mentoring people, and as I said earlier, showing them that the window of opportunity is not this big, but can be this big. And all the things that are out there, if they can stay in school, get educated, work hard, put some effort in it, and getting them the help if they, a lot of kids, my kids had the ability, they had computers, they had me. I was a tutor many times. Then they had tutors. Then they were born, I have to say, they were born intelligent and they had a lot of capabilities. You have a lot of kids that live in environments, they don't have an iPad, they don't have a computer, they don't have access to books, they don't have access to adults that can help them with their reading or whatever. So it's a deficit. And these things are important to have programs like Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and other programs that can raise funds and provide this sort of help for kids. And the Fulfillment Fund that has put tens of thousands of children, helping them through high school and then getting them into college with scholarships so they can fulfill their potential. These are and really bright kids that would otherwise have fallen through the cracks of society. So these are responsibilities, and I want to say that when you have some modicum of success, I believe you have a responsibility to do something, many things positive with that, and to help other people up those rungs of that ladder. I know I was helped. I was helped through certain teachers I had in school, and having a stellar mother who, even though she worked as a bookkeeper in a bank in New York City, she had to travel on the train every day and come back at 1 o'clock in the morning because she worked with 50 people underneath her as a head bookkeeper for a bank in Manhattan. Our clothes had to be out and our homework had to be out. And and I did the same thing with my kids. I checked their homework. I wanted to make sure that they had done their homework, the work was done. A lot of children don't have that opportunity.
No, it's amazing. So you mentioned, obviously, you were born and raised in New York. Your passion for the arts and the creative, as well as studying in biochemistry, experimental psychology, is incredibly diverse. So do you believe that this helped you and contributed and influenced to where you are today?
Unequivocally, yes. And that is because I think that a broad, in Europe, it's a little different, I believe, Karen, you could say it. I think after a certain age, people are very focused on what are you going to do? Are you going into physics? Are you going into the arts? Are you going in there? And that can be a very much a positive thing too, in terms of channeling people and making sure they have a career path.
Yes.
But what about a life path? What about the
100%.
fact that people live longer? They may change. We change as we grow. And maybe some of those children have followed a certain life path because their father was an attorney or their mother was a physician, or they've always been CPAs, accountants, and they felt obligated to follow, and they're miserable in that field. So they've done it. So having a diverse set of interests and a diverse set of education go far beyond being able to discuss Keats and Yeats and
Yes.
world politics at a
Textbook.
cocktail party. Yeah, it's all important because I love poetry, and I read and I love literature, but it's more than all of these things. It's a matter of, again, being able to relate to all sorts of people. If you have diverse interests, when you meet other people with other interests, you're able to forge a relationship or a connection. And those people may very well come into your business, or you may be seeking a position in one of their businesses, or it may give you ideas to do other things later in life, to start to say, I want to do this now. I can be entrepreneurial here because I have skill sets there and I have interest there. It also is far more of a rounded life. I mean, I don't want to be a little withered rose. I want to be a rose in full bloom. We'll all wither at some point to some respect, but there's some beauty in that withered rose as well. It stood the test of time. It fulfilled its purpose with its beauty and aroma. And I think that having diverse interests has helped me. I have to tell you, having a background in biochemistry helped me get the wood burning oven into my Asian fusion restaurant in Santa Monica. I went to the health department. The contractor couldn't get the plans signed off on. The health inspector said, you can't have a brick fireplace in the back of the kitchen there because it's porous, it's not healthy, it has to be a smooth surface. So I finally went in to see him, and I explained to him that I will put a polymer coating on it. And he said to me, that's ridiculous, it's just going to burn off. And I tried to say to him, no, actually, sir, it won't, because when you heat a polymer, the bonds of the plastic actually become stronger, and it'll be even more protective. He didn't believe me. I tried to explain about the coating on the inside with the double layer brick, that there wouldn't be any passage of the heat from the internal brick surface to the exterior, but he didn't want to hear. So I went home, climbed into the attic in our little house prior to this house, and found my organic chem textbook, came the next morning and waited for 1 hour. I was the first person at the health department, walked in a little pinafore dress with little ruffles on it, intentionally, like some little innocent girl, and then opened my organic chem textbook and read quietly but loud enough so the other people at the tables around could hear, the other health inspectors. And I read about the molecular structure of polymers, and then I leaned in very closely and I said, so, Inspector White, if you don't sign off on our health plan today, because you've cost us so much money in the month we haven't been able to open, I'm going to have to get an attorney and sue you. And he signed that health plan so quick. So I have to say, Karen, that sometimes a little bit of knowledge here and there and there and there and there go a long way.
100%.
Yes.
So what would you say some of your biggest career highlights have been? And I'm
would
sure there've
say
been many, but
there have, but my biggest life highlight was having my children.
yes.
My biggest career highlights, probably initially the first restaurant, because I had to deal with my former husband at the time. He went off to promote the book, the cookbook. And prior to that, his so-called partner, which was really more like his boss at Ma Maison, found out that he was going to be, we were planning on opening this restaurant. We had found a spot or whatever. I said to Wolf, he came back and he said, Patrick wants half of the restaurant. And I said, absolutely, as long as he gives you half of Ma Maison. And he said, well, I have the bonds and the stocks. I go, they're all bogus. And that's another long story I won't get into. When I was cleaning up his house and I found all these boxes with the deed for the house mixed in with menus from Maxine, mixed in with these stock certificates from Ma Maison. I said, well, these things aren't real. And he said, yeah, they are. And I, again, was very young, but I just knew that they were just pieces. And it's a long story. So then basically I said no. And then the next day, Patrick fired him, and he was so upset because he had never been fired from a job before. And it was a stupid move on Patrick's part. But anyway, so what happened next was I was building and building while he was gone. And he was constantly having these nightmares that what if it fails? What if it fails? What if it fails? And then I had Rita Linewell, who from Bon Appetit magazine, take me out to lunch and grabbing my wrist and saying, how can he leave Ma Maison from making beurre blanc to pizzas? And I said, well, even beurre blanc gets boring after a while. So I had more confidence because probably I was more naive and more ignorant about the industry at the time. And the biggest hit it was a huge hit the first night, far beyond what we expected. We ran out of food the first evening. We were hustling for food. We had more people than we could imagine. So, and then after that, it was crazy nights. I called myself a modern day geisha girl because I used to have to stand with pizzas in the bar area because people would be waiting an hour and a half. Would never happen today for their tables because stars wouldn't get up, other stars would come in. It was nuts. So that was a huge success. And frankly, many people decided they're going to open restaurants after that because they thought it was so easy, and many failed. So it was, we could say it was a fluke, but it really wasn't because, it was the zeitgeist. I think it just all happened at the right wave, the right moment. I think the other great hits and highlights of my life were every single time I finished a huge project, because the next ones I had more money. Spago was a little house sitting up on the hill, high above Sunset, two women that had been sisters. It was a dilapidated little old house, and I had $750,000. That's it. And 500,000 of it went for retrofitting for the earthquake and the rest, and take money under the table, so to speak, for the key money for the liquor license and stuff, which we had to buy. I don't mean anything illegal.
For sure.
All the things we had to do, and I was left with so little to make it look attractive. So the next one was Chinois in Santa Monica, and I had a little bit more money. And then Granita in Malibu, and Eureka, the restaurant brewery, I won awards for Granita. I was on the cover of magazines. I guess a highlight for me was being included in 1991 in the Platinum Circle, like a hall of fame of architects and designers and people in the industry. So that's always been something I'm very proud of. But I think my other highlight, and then I built Spago Beverly Hills years later. I did many cafes in between. I spent 4 years on the 28,000 square foot restaurant in Orlando from the ground up. It was, and Grenada and Grenada and Eureka were built from the ground up. Huge projects for me. I think one of my highlights, I've won many awards, but for me, the James Beard Humanitarian Award and the National Organization of Women Business Owners. Not only did I win the Millennial Award for Business Acumen and whatever in 2000, I won an award called the Legacy Award for a lifetime of philanthropic work. And I think that those two awards have a great deal of meaning because they're based on something I did do and I earned, and that was raise tens of millions of dollars to our American Wine and Food Festival for Meals on Wheels. The work I do with Sheba Hospital, the largest hospital in the Middle East now, didn't fall into it, but I've continued that legacy. I think that a life of doing good and changing other people's lives gives your life a lot of meaning.
Absolutely, without a doubt. So you've had such you have such an incredible talent, and your attention to detail is so finely tuned. It's not simply about another restaurant, but about the entire experience. So from the moment a client walks in the door to the design of the entire culinary experience. So can you share with us more about that? And when you're creating this magical and extraordinary experience for the customer, what is the process when embarking on each restaurant project?
Well, you know, presently the Spago Beverly Hills is not, the structure is the same, the way it's laid out, the skylight's in the same place, the patio, but it's been new iterations. Not, they're clean, they're modern, whatever, they're modern, I don't know what modern means anymore. It's not my design, but I took all of the hand-blown glass, the unique fixtures I designed, the chairs, and I incorporated a lot of the huge panels of glass that were custom made into my home here, and I extended the kitchen by 10 feet out and 10 feet over and built a state-of-the-art kitchen and bathroom. And so and all the beautiful hand-blown, one-of-a-kind light fixtures from Grenada. So I'm surrounded by all the beauty that I really love and that I created, and it gives me a great deal of joy every day. In fact, I get up and say, I can't believe this is my kitchen, or I can't believe this is my bathroom. And so going back, when I was incorporating them into the restaurants, that's why we don't call them chains. None of them look alike.
No. Really.
Conceptually, they have aspects sometimes that are the same. You have an open kitchen, although now Spago Beverly Hills, even the first iteration I did, it's an open kitchen, but it's behind glass. And I always used to call it La Danse de la Cuisinier, the dance of the chefs, because you could see them moving around. It's sort of, but it was sort of like I hope I get this right. It was at Marcel Marceau, the mime. You could see them moving, but you can't hear them, which is actually better than it was at Spago Hollywood, because more often than not, you would hear a chef utter a profanity when something didn't work out, and banging the pots and pans, and that's hard to sit next to sometimes when you're trying to have an elegant meal.
Yes.
So that being said, each restaurant for me had to have a meaning, a deeper meaning. Often the deep purpose, the deep aspect of the meaning, the guest may not understand it at first intellectually unless you explain it, but you can understand it viscerally. If you do a good design, you walk into a home or a space that is well designed and flows well, you feel it, you feel good, you feel comfortable. If things are off in a space, or, you know, I don't want to get into feng shui and whatever, but some of it is innate, some feng shui is innate. If we're hitting obstacles, so to speak, visually, or you're hitting obstacles even physically, like you have to move around something or whatever, and the flow isn't there, you feel it immediately. So I think that a restaurant is about a space, any space, but I'm going to talk about restaurants, but a home, a good office design, anything, even a great museum. But museums have a certain purpose the same way restaurants do. The art is the star, and in the restaurant, the food and the people are the stars. But how do you make them the stars? First of all, you don't want a space that feels more important than the people. So sometimes when you create grand spaces, people can feel minimized. It works, somehow in Europe and some of the great spaces, because historically you're implementing something, you're incorporating a restaurant in a grand space that had been, so that's okay. But when you build these new spaces, I think, and you're not taking in the scale of the human and understanding that the lighting, the furniture, the space to walk, how you're seated, how comfortable it is, the ergonomics of the seat, all of it, you're not considering the most important element in the restaurant, which is
the people.
Yes, the people, right.
Yeah.
And so it has to do with making the food look great, making the people look great, and then all the other elements that come into, obviously when you walk into a space and the aroma and the lighting, the sound elements, the textures, the fabrics, all of that are really important. But I will say that's the designer in me speaking. As a restaurateur, the first thing that happens is the greeting. How are you greeted when you call the restaurant? How are you greeted when you come into the restaurant? Are you made to feel important? Are you made comfortable? We like to have people feel like they're coming into their own living room or their own home.
Yes.
Now, in the time of COVID, that is much more difficult because sadly, I feel like a policewoman sometimes because I'm forced to tell people outside, you must put your mask on. It's a law in Beverly Hills. And then they think it's a chin strap. So then I'm forced to tell them you have to put it over your nose. And then I'm forced to tell them, or my staff is that, I'm inclined to have to tell them, when you come in, you have to keep it on. And when you sit at your table to dine, to drink and dine, you can take it off. So this is not a, it doesn't fall into the great category of true hospitality. It's very, so we have to work even harder now to make people feel that they're in their own environment and that they feel safe. So going back to pre-COVID, I think when it comes to design, I think that a lot of designers don't take into consideration. That's why I brought up early lighting. When I talked about when I studied at NYU, lighting, set design, all of these were important skill sets I learned. I learned about, which I innately knew anyway, the power of color and how color looks under different lights. A color like this amethyst or this purple kind of brown downs, gets darker depending upon the lighting in space. You have to think about, you may think that certain lighting looks great, but you don't know how it's going to look on the skin tone, how it changes what the food looks like. So all of these things are things that people learn empirically, meaning through experience, or hopefully prior to that. I worked with a lot of architects, some were even employed by me, that hadn't taken one lighting class getting through architectural school. They have extraordinary talents in terms of space and functionality, with regard to HVAC systems and all of that. And that's another thing I would say, you can put the ductwork there, but it's going to be coming down the back of the person's neck sitting at that booth. So I was a tyrant about this in terms of what's called the reflected ceiling plans. I would say we have art going here, we have people going here, we have tables going here. The first thing that has to happen is the lighting plan. The HVAC, the heating and air conditioning people, are going to have to put their ductwork around the lighting plan. Well, that's good. I said, I don't care. You're going to have to make that work. And all of those things are important in design. And then invariably, I would finish with all of this, the restaurant would open and people would say, what a pretty job you did. And I call you a decorator, and they don't understand there's a difference.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
a big difference.
A big difference, and there's a lot of complexity that goes into making all the elements of a good design work in a restaurant. And I can make that analogous a little bit, Karen, to people come into a restaurant, and some people, although it's changing now that there's so many cooking shows and so many cooking magazines, and now they've seen the kind of work that goes into cooking, but they used to believe, oh, the chefs came in 2 hours ago and now we have our dinner. They don't understand. Some people are working all through the night to do the baking. Some people come in at 5:30, 6, 7 in the morning to prepare for the whole day, the mise en place, the prep work, the sauces, everything that goes into making their meal wonderful.
Yeah, it's amazing. People have got very narrow perspective on what goes on behind the scenes, for sure.
Well, but with everything, with TV production, with creating a business, which we can talk about, creating a business, having a product, coming up with an idea, and thinking, I can just put this out there in the market and it's going to be a success.
Yeah. So, can you share with us when you started out, when was your big break that changed the trajectory of your career? Were there multiple?
The big break was definitely Spago Hollywood being such a huge hit. To have within the first year, the LA Times on its cover said Spagoization of America, how this type of restaurant not only impacted Los Angeles dining scene, but how it impacted the dining scene across the country. There's a book called Chefs, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. I'm in it. I'm featured in it quite a lot, but I'm definitely not part of the drug scene. I never did drugs. I went to college for 12 and a half years, and my sons always say, Mom, you're really weird. You never did any drugs. And I go, that's right, boys. And I even went to Woodstock when I was 15 and a half. And I said, with a friend, and I said, I went there quite innocent, and I came back quite innocent. But I always had a notion of who I was, and coming from my mother, so very strongly so. When you're very strongly loved and you have a good sense of self-worth, you're not as easily influenced by people. So I would say definitely that incredible success of Spago and the impact it made, and the fact that we paid our investors back, all of them, within the first year, before the first year was up, is unheard of in a business where 90% of all restaurants fail within the first year. And not because the chef may not be talented or you don't have great, but mostly poor management. Poor management, poor understanding of having working capital for the hard moments of maybe you're not a big hit immediately, maybe you miscalculated the demographics, or you haven't really gotten out there to the community yet. Because part of a success of a business is, I was quoted in, I don't know, 1984 or something, or 85, in a magazine about chinois. And my big quote, my big mantra is, if you want the community to be interested in you, you must be interested in the community.
Yes. And
that's where our investment in helping communities through cause-related events came to be. It comes from the heart, but it also comes, it's a smart business move, but it came from the heart because we wanted to help people who were started with Meals on Wheels, who were food challenged. So we started with the American Wine and Food Festival Foundation, which, well, now it's mine. I own the foundation, the 501c3, but then it was the Puck Lazaroff Charitable Foundation for Meals on Wheels. You know, I often say when I used to speak, asked to speak about philanthropy, that many people do the right thing, sometimes for the wrong reason.
Wrong reasons. Yeah.
What I mean by that, and I think you know, Karen, is that they want to be fashionable, they want to be in the in crowd, they want to get dressed up in pretty clothes and go to events and be in that with those women, or they want to look good, but or they want to be able to deduct it off their taxes or whatever it might be. But so often, so many people get involved and they feel so good about the good they're doing that they're hooked. They're hooked for the right reasons. And let me tell you, it doesn't matter why anybody's doing it, whether it's the good for the right reason or the wrong reason. Guess what? The recipient of these good deeds doesn't care.
No.
They are benefiting and they need that food. They need that mental health care. They need that cancer research. They need somebody to pick them up in a van that's supported by those donations to take them to their medical appointments. Or the elderly need food. The homebound who can't get out need not only the food, but that one time a day that somebody cares enough to come over and say, how are you doing? You know, Mr. Mark, how are you doing?
It goes back to that compassion.
Exactly. So, you know, and very often in those situations, sometimes with the elderly or the ill, they may be the first person to find the person's ill or even passed away because they have no family or anybody else that's visiting them, or their family's far away. So that's their link to the community. Because they live behind doors with 6 or 8 blocks. Seriously, I'm not exaggerating. They're afraid in the communities they live in. So all of this, you know, businesses should be and are a part of the fabric of a community. And that's what's so sad right now, with what is happening with COVID. And that's why it's important to support your local restaurants, your local pharmacy, your local hardware store, even, you know, all of it. It's important because they're not going to be there otherwise when this is. And let's pray this is over soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've featured in some of the biggest publications and TV networks, from CNN to GQ, Vogue, E! Entertainment, and so many more. How important was publicity for you, and did this open other doors for you? And can you give us some examples?
Well, I think if you use publicity as a vehicle in a good way, for instance, Angelino magazine, it's in the community here. You know, they have a whole group of magazines, has featured me as in the philanthropy issue and other women, you know, and then there are other issues where they do business issues or whatever. It gives the community an opportunity to hear about certain charities they might not have heard about, or to see, oh, Barbara Lazaroff is working with these girls, or working with Sheba Hospital, working with, you know, No Kid Hungry. Maybe that's something I should get involved with. You know, I'm about to join Visionary Women, which is, they have great lectures, great women, they do great work. I've been a part of myriad other organizations, probably too many most of the time. So the press can be a very positive thing. press can also be a very negative thing. I've had very hurtful things written about me. That's where you have a hard shell. I've had absolutely lies written about me. I mean, I am shocked, where they use my former, the ex-wife of did this and that, and she had a.
Oh, it's awful.
She started yelling in this restaurant, completely untrue. And my attorney said, why? If you fight it, you just make a mix. And I go, you're right. So you have to let them go. But then people Google you and they see things and they believe it. I mean, I know years ago they said I had a monkey in the backyard.
Oh, no.
I did have 2 llamas, though. I had a big menagerie. But I mean, so press can be used in a very negative, hurtful way. And you must believe in yourself and be strong enough within to know you're a good person, your intentions are well grounded, and to not go out and hurt people or say things that are malicious or untrue. But the press does. So the positive way it works is that, sure, the more validity, it provides a lot more validity. I mean, I'll tell you, even to be on Wikipedia, they're crazy sometimes.
Big time.
you can be a person of some note doing fantastic work in a very, and I know many of them that do amazing work, who are extraordinary human beings, but they don't get the press. They don't have an article. They're not in hardcover books like I am on design or whatever. And so Wikipedia is not interested because they want all those links to all those things. And so it's ridiculous, I mean, and then even though I've helped produce films and whatever, they sometimes argue, well, that doesn't, there's not an article written about you doing that. So, it's all this. So it's complex. As I said, there's good and bad that comes out of being noted, or as we say, the other part of it, notoriety. Yeah, it's not a positive thing all the time. So I think that's another important. If you're going to believe all the good press, sometimes you have to deal with the bad press.
Yeah. And also, like you say, I think you also have to pick your battles at the end of the day, because otherwise you'll be fighting a lot of negativity, which detracts from all the good stuff.
The trash magazines like to.
Awful.
Luckily, I'm not running around having affairs. I don't have a drug issue. I'm not one to get inebriated in public and say stupid things. No. I am outspoken about certain issues. So a lot of people that are outspoken can sometimes get their feet in the hot water, so to speak, because things can get misinterpreted.
100%. Yeah. And I think everybody's super sensitive these days that you can't actually say anything without somebody being offended. So you have to be so mindful about how you actually say or speak about any subject.
I have Black friends that have been accused of saying the wrong thing about their own communities, and I've spoken with them because our kids went to school together and we're friends for 25, 30 years. And we talk about it sometimes, and I said, that must be very hard for you. And they say, yeah, it is. And then I have Jewish friends that, will say something because, we have a lot of anti-Semitism in the world now, and it's growing and it's really difficult. So when people speak up, you have to understand when somebody's speaking about their own group or whatever, once again, it goes back to listening to the concerns, listening to where that's coming from. And if more people would listen and engage on a platform of patience, tolerance, and love, we would have a far better world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that leads me, you also an author, and can you share with our audience how this came about, and was this an organic process for you? I mean, was it natural progression to write a book, or?
This I'll make it quick, but it's rather funny. I do want to write, and I have written poetry years ago, and I've had some poetry published and whatever, but most people don't know about that. And I did work on the first book, that book, and then I also used to write a lot of Wolf's speeches, and I told him finally, you can do this yourself. This is he didn't want to in the beginning, and I said, well, I'm going to charge you then. I'm going to start charging $1,000 a speech. And that annoyed him. So eventually he learned. But I thought this is the only way, you know. And then onward with my children, you know, when you have kids in school, you do a lot of editing and a lot of, you know, whatever. And when I was much, much younger, I was the editor of my school newspaper and all of it. So I like to write, and I do have an intention to write books one day. And I've written a number of children's books. Unfortunately, they haven't been published because when I took them to Random House, I got the strangest letter back about they're somehow too naive and too sophisticated at the same time. And yet Jed Mattis, the agent for Dr. Seuss, loved them deeply. So if I had pursued it again, I will still have them published, and they are adorable and I love them.
Yeah.
But what happened at that juncture was I had a bunch of restaurants to build, and I got so busy with the business, but they're actually sitting right next to me in this bottom drawer, and they're partially illustrated, and because I draw also, but my girlfriend's a far better illustrator, and so we had met many times, and then she got busy writing a very serious book about her son Nick, who's a friend, he became schizophrenic, and he was diagnosed, and so that book's coming out shortly. So I get it. So going back to the writing, I had this girlfriend, Trisha, and Trisha wanted to write this book, Wishes for a Mother's Heart, and she kept pushing me and pushing me and pushing me to be part of it. So she has these wishes, which are prose-like poems that she wrote, and other ideas for it, and I wrote some essays in the book, and also she wanted me to do the go-to action things, so we did that. And then she wanted to do more wishes book, wishes for grief, wishes for this, wishes. And I said, you know, Trisha, you're the one that came up with this. You're the one that wants to continue this brand. This is your baby. And just like I did with Wolf, interesting, I've never told the story this sequentially like this before. I said, you need to do it on your own. I'm very good at kind of pushing people out. You know,
yeah.
And now she came out with another book, and now she's coming out with yet another book that I just finished editing for her. And I think that I have thought about my book in many, many ways. I think they're doing a documentary on Wolf, and I almost did not participate. And both my sons said, Barb, you know, they said Mom, they didn't say Barbara. Mom, Mom. Over a period of many months, they said, Mom, you did this, you created, you founded it, you have to. I said, Byron Cameron, my part's going to be edited down to, you know, whatever it's going to. He said, doesn't matter, you have to do it. So I finally did it, but of course, because it's our brand and I own 50% of the intellectual property of the name Wolfgang Puck, I had to be very careful, and I had to watch what I said, even questions like what kind of father was Wolf. So I came up with, I sat there and I went, I think he took a very European approach to fathering. You know, a little bit more, I was a bit more hands-on. Well, you know, I was doing 99% of it. I cannot say, though, that as a provider, he wasn't there, because financially, not only were we together for over 25 years, we were also, you know, we also had businesses together. The law in America, if you handle it correctly, enforces these things, and I had made sure that college was, you know, whatever. But I paid for half of many things, like the bar mitzvah for one of my sons, the marriage for my older son, And in fact, I paid for more than half of it because I had bought a beautiful ring for my mother, and a beautiful ring that looked like an engagement ring, and I gave it to Cameron to give to. So there's things. So, there's a lot of, I'll be honest, there's a lot of ill will and things, but we still have to work together. So, and he's still the father of the children. So I had to be very careful. So that pertains to my writing in my book. I have to be very careful about how you approach a book like that. If you are thoroughly transparent and honest, people sometimes will look at you as the bitter ex-wife, but I'm not bitter. I'm a happy person. I have a wonderful partner for the last 16 years, and I am probably in many ways better off because I found out different things about myself, and also John is a far more attentive partner on a personal level because I was always terribly engaged in work and everything about work. And I have a girlfriend who's an attorney who wanted me to go on her podcast to talk about narcissism in relationships and whatever. I said, I can't really talk about that because this is my brand. So, when I talk about writing the book, that was my first reference, and I was not referring to my former partner when I said I have to wait for more people to die. It's rather that it's a joke that I always tell that maybe sounds cold-hearted, but it's not. It pertains to a perspective on time. I have a new friend that just wrote a book. He started out in the Bronx as I did. He's generations, a big generation, like he's my parents' generation and a little bit younger, but right around it, my parents' generation. And he started out in the Bronx as I did, in a very strange environment where his father worked in a burlesque club, and he got early lessons early on in life and whatever, and then rose to the CEO of and co-founder of a huge conglomerate company that he helped create. But he's an elegant, philosophical, intelligent, maybe not books. He's not a university school man, but definitely empirically, yes, did a lot of reading and whatever. And that people who have written books later in life, to me, they have a longer perspective and the things in their life that have disturbed them or have changed them or have enraged them or have brought more love in them, everything is tempered with time. And I'm just waiting a little bit more because I think I will have a different perspective on some of the moments and changes in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've also won many awards, which you briefly touched on earlier in the interview. So this is obviously exceptional achievements. So would you say that this opened other doors within your career or other opportunities, having won these awards?
Well, I have to tell you, I was going to say it earlier, but starting women chefs and restaurateurs with some very powerful women chefs at the time. I was the only non-chef but restaurant owner, entrepreneur, that was invited to join the board. There was only 7 or 8 of us, 7 or 8. And Barbara Trop passed away. Subsequently, Lily Bastiach is still. This came about because there was I was written about in the New York Times. Now, again, as I alluded to, well, I didn't allude to, I said earlier that there are many people doing great things or accomplishing things or that are just working day to day, doing great work or good work that don't get acknowledged in that way. No. And I have to say, it wasn't like I was doing something different and more exceptional at the time. I had been doing it for years. But all of a sudden, Barbara became aware of it because I was written about. So she thought to herself, I'm sure, that, oh, maybe she has more validity than I thought. So then I was asked. So that's how it helps. But I think that it's important for people, you've got a lot of young people now that want to be celebrity chefs. They want to, you ask
We want to
them,
be famous for being famous.
you got it.
Yeah.
You're alluding to the Kardashians, but they did it. Just because they did it doesn't mean, again, a matter of the zeitgeist and a number of other things. Actually, even in all the silliness of what they do and don't do, they worked hard at it, very hard at it. And they made a whole production, a brand out of it, whatever, whether you agree with it or not, they did it.
Yeah.
When you ask young people sometimes, what do you want to do? They this is not something that's changed terribly, but it maybe more so because of the way our society became so, I think social media, oh goodness.
Big time.
And social media has affected people in positive and very negative ways as well. It has helped entrepreneurs that do not have the money to do big campaigns, to present a product or whatever. It's helped companies get their product, their app, whatever it be out there. What it also has done was given young people the idea that everybody should be a star, and that showing your booty, all those booty pictures, and being a little too revealing about things is okay. And it's not. I think it
becomes classless.
Yes, and it also diminishes a certain value and integrity about women that I'm just going to talk about women right now.
Yes.
Being demeaned and going back to an era when women were only considered a body with no brains, a pretty face,
with not much between the ears.
You got it. So I think that's most unfortunate, but for some women, it's an easy way to go about it.
Yeah.
But it's sad because, look, we all age. There's going to come a time when, we're not as adorable as we were at 17 and 18 and 20 and 25. And even if a woman is more mature and attractive, it doesn't appeal to the people looking at that Instagram post the same way, because youth is like a prize in and of itself. So
it's also finite.
It's so finite, and it's unfortunate. And that's why it harkens back to what we were talking about having other skill sets, being educated, being prepared, and also being prepared to know just because you've gotten married doesn't mean that man who came in on the white horse, the black horse, the purple horse, whatever it may be, and has so-called saved you, is going to always be there. And I actually gave a talk years ago at the women's conference, like 1,500 women in the room prior. This is how long ago it was. My older son is now 31, prior to ever having children. And they asked me, how can we teach our young girls to be more independent, more entrepreneurial, more to be able to get out there and to be able to take care of themselves. And I was a little bit at a loss because I stood there for about 15 seconds or 20 seconds without answering. And that's a long time. And I said, you can see, I've been speaking now for about an hour, showing you slides, talking about things. And now I'm a bit at a loss here for words. And that's because I'm thinking, because standing before you as a woman, even at my age, I haven't had children yet. But I have to say, I don't know if I'll have a boy or a girl. But I think since I had two brothers and I saw how hard my mother worked, and I've seen how some women are treated in the world, and their position, I have to say that maybe we have to start by teaching our young boys, the young men in our homes, or the young men to be, that their sisters, their mothers, and their girlfriends and their wives and their secretaries and the other people that they'll meet out there, and their colleagues, women that will hopefully be on par with them in the business world one day, are not merely appendages of what they do.
Yeah.
That they have to learn. So teach your sons to do the laundry, teach your sons to cook, teach your sons to find their own socks and the milk in the refrigerator.
Yes.
And try to hone out this idea of pantry blindness and teach them to be independent on their own, because I want to tell all the young women out there that are sitting out there with grown women like myself, that 50% of marriages fail. So if you're intending to have children, understand you may be raising them by yourself. And there was like this gasp in the audience, like, like this intake of breath, and then but they knew it was true, and they started to applaud. And I was so taken aback, because I hadn't even thought about that question myself until
Somebody asked it. Wow. So that leads me to the two final questions. What are the 3 key pieces of advice you would give to other entrepreneurs who are looking to pursue a career in the same industry or in general? And what legacy would you like to leave?
The legacy question I'll leave to last. It's a tough one. I touched on some of these issues before. That first of all, one I didn't touch on, you want to put a product out there as an entrepreneur, or you're the product, you yourself are the product, or you've created a product, whether it be an app, whether it be, I don't know, clothing, some kind of clothing line or perfume line, or some kind of creative device you made. My friend came up with something for dogs so they don't hit their heads if they're blind. You know, many kinds of ideas. Another friend came up with, who sold it for many millions, the gel pads on the bottom of your feet that go in the shoes. All kinds of ideas. So many. And with NABO, we would have the National Association of Business Owners. Every year when we gave out the awards, there would be one for up and coming business person, you know, new ideas and whatever, and such inventive ideas. But you have to think, what differentiates you and your product, or you or your product or your app, or whatever it is you're trying to promote. What differentiates you from the other things that may be similar out there in the marketplace? Do your research. Do your research, because believe me, as brilliant as you may be or think you are, there may be, very much so, there may be products very similar to yours. And then how do you compare price point wise? Make yourself up a think board, make yourself up things of pros and cons about why your product or yourself or whatever, what is it that's unique about it? And can you compete in that marketplace? Will you have enough capital? Are you going to do a GoFundMe or a fund, you know, a fundraiser for it to be able to have people participate? Are you going to be able to find investors? Do you know how to do a business plan? When at Women Chefs and Restaurateurs, we have these breakout sessions where you meet individually with certain people, and I've given advice over the years. One of the most important things a young female entrepreneur can do is take a class, a business class, on how to prepare a business plan and do one properly. So it's succinct, it's to the point, the numbers are correct, understanding what you need initially to bring your product or your restaurant, to build your restaurant out to fruition, what you see. Let's take a restaurant. What the demographics are. Why do you think it would do well in that neighborhood?
Yeah.
How do you fulfill a need there? What do you see as the monies you're going to be needing? What do you see as your turnover? Why do you see that? How are you projecting that? Are you going to have 2 turnovers, 1.5 turnovers? Are you going to be open how many days of the week? What kind of food are you going to serve? What is your price point going to be? What do you think your labor costs will be? Your food costs will be? All of these elements, because very often you have to go to the bank to get a loan. And I will tell you that it's getting better, but it is still tough. And now it's worse than ever. Tough out there. And more women are turned down for loans than men, because it's still a patriarchal society. So it's those types of things. The other thing is, if you do get all this together, make sure you have some working capital, because it's not going to necessarily be a success right off the bat. Think about how you're going to market it, who's going to help you, all of these things. But absolutely make sure you have, if you don't have some semblance of a little bit of a business background, partner up with somebody that does, who can control the money. One of the girls, young ladies, wanted to leave the company she was working for that had a number of outlets that was making donuts, gourmet donuts. So I said to her, we were in a private meeting out of town, where our conference was. And I said, okay, so you make the donuts at this company and they're doing really well and they're very sophisticated for donuts and whatever. How much does the flour cost? How much do you use? How much sugar do you use? How long does it take? How many donuts can you make per hour? What's the price point? What do you sell them for? So what's the bottom line net? She knew the answers to none of these questions.
Wow.
So I said, well, I'm going to tell you, the first thing you have to do is go take a business course. And I wouldn't leave your place of work until you ascertain some of these answers, because you may not know it, but your boss, you may have a lot of business, but you don't really know what her bottom line is. You don't know what her rent is. You don't know what her insurance costs are. You don't know what her labor costs are. You don't understand what is she really netting. So she could be losing money, and you may be losing money when you try to go out and do this too. So I would say understanding all the facts and partnering up perhaps with somebody that has same passions but a different skill set might be very helpful.
Yes, absolutely. And what legacy would you like to leave?
I was asked that as well for the documentary. The legacy that I used to think when I was a young girl that I wanted to leave, again, life perspective. I think for me, I've come to see that there's lots of well-known people, they die alone and unhappy sometimes. Others die very happy and very successful. And for some people, their legacy or their notoriety is a funny word because people don't understand it's misused. No. It means negative things. So their fame or their remembrance in the world is all that matters to them. It really is, are people going to remember me? Well, we have Shakespeare.
Yes.
we have Marilyn Monroe. I'm going to spare. We have Einstein. Yes, but basically, considering the billions of people that have been on the face of this earth, some of them that have done remarkable things.
Yeah.
Some people will remember Kanye West, but don't know who Einstein is. Some people remember the Kardashians, but don't know who Socrates or Aristotle are. Yeah. So I say that the first legacy I want to leave is within my family. I want to have been known as a good mother that raised good citizens of the world so that they can raise healthy-minded and responsible children. As far as me in a broader sense outside of family, which I think is the most important, I think I'd like to be remembered as a person that cared about the community, cared about the community here and globally, because I do other things, initiatives that are more global. I've helped a lot of women in business. I've invested in some women's businesses and given them a lot of mentoring. I think that ripple effect, I don't know, may not get documented again, may not get documented and be remembered in that way, but I've impacted these people's lives, and those people have impacted the lives of many people in many impoverished countries with their businesses, giving people jobs. So sure, would I like to be remembered as a talented designer, a person who absolutely helped change dining in America, and as a woman that supported other women in the business? Yes, but that's going to fade from generation to generation to generation. It just will. That's just not.
It's the impact that you left on other people, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think so, absolutely. And that may fade from generation to generation too. How well do you know your great-great-grandmother, your great-great-great? You don't, but their DNA, their journey, their challenges, successes and failures, and their struggle to keep their family going is the reason you are here, and mine is the reason that I am here. And as they say, we stand on the shoulders of giants. Some giants are bigger than others. Some have accomplished more than, but my grandparents and great-grandparents were giants in their own way, because those struggles are as big. It's sort of analogous to when a 5-year-old has their heart broken, a 15-year-old has their heart broken, a 25-year-old, or myself with my divorce, or which I ultimately asked for finally. Those heartbreaks all are just as painful and strong. It just happens in a different way, different moment. I grant you, when you have a heartbreak like that and you have children involved, it's more about making sure the children are okay. So I would say the legacy really has to be something that makes you feel that you have fulfilled many of your purposes. Often, I feel frustrated at times. There were many things and many opportunities, Karen, that were presented to me, and because I had children, I could not accept them. 11 restaurant projects around the world within a year and a half, and I had young children to raise, and I knew that Wolfgang wasn't going to be there taking care of them, so I would have to give them to a nanny, and I waited a long time to have my children. So
so it was an important part of your life, and theirs.
And it shows, because they're good people, good human beings. But ultimately, everybody has challenges, sacrifices, joy, losses, and that is all, and hopefully overcomes all of that to somehow all becomes a life history. And that's your legacy. Your legacy is, did you lead a life of character and value? Did you help others? And there's that famous adage that says, did you make the world a little bit of a better place just for having been there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Barbara, for your time. And if people want to connect with you, what is the best platforms to do so?
Well, they can find me at Barbara Lazaroff _official on Instagram. You can send me a DM me. You can send a message to my assistant Kay at Imaginings Design. I like the way you said it, Imagings, but it's
Sorry.
ININGS. There's an S, so design singular. So IMAGININGS design.com, or they can find me on Facebook, or they can leave me a message at Spago, Beverly Hills. I'll get it eventually. But just know with the DMs, I do look at them every single day. I know a lot of people do.
Yeah.
They can Facebook message me. I'm not that kind of person that is compulsive about it. But eventually you'll get an answer. But please do me a favor, everyone. I am involved in so many charities, and I know every one of you has an important cause. Every cause is important. But I have learned to now focus on the things that matter to me so I can get them done. So you have to understand, I can't get involved in everybody's cause anymore, because I'm already for 30, 35 years working on things that I have to keep supporting and have to keep doing. If you have a particular question or an issue, I might be able to help and answer, give you some advice, but I'm just being earnest about that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Barbara.
It's been
wonderful having you.
It's been a delight, and I hope to get to London to see you. I used to go often to see my godson there, who's a grown-up man. Went to Cambridge. He's a big boy, big guy. But I love London, and my partner's English, so we do go. And of course, in the time of COVID, we won't. So let's hope that let's hope for everyone for a far healthier world, and a more peaceful world, and a more tolerant world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.